Wall Street veteran Bernard Madoff has been arrested and charged with running a $50 billion Ponzi scheme.
Congress wants to know what caused the Enron meltdown.
Now, while the collective rage currently is focused on WorldCom,
Tyco CEO Dennis Kozlowski was convicted of looting hundreds of millions of dollars.
This is one of the biggest fraud cases ever.
Their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Find out more on this week's episode of White Collars, Red Hands.
Did you know that Bunco is not just a dice game played by elderly ladies? It is also a term for confidence scams supposedly derived from the Spanish word for bank, banco, that still goes on to this day and is synonymous with swindle schemes or con games. Today, a bunco scheme might take the form of a fake IRS agent calling you on the phone and demanding that you pay back taxes which you don't actually owe. Of course, these scams are disproportionately targeted towards the elderly, who are more easily tricked by these schemes. Elderly individuals are more susceptible to these schemes, in some part because they, bought their houses on wages that wouldn't buy a mid-sized sedan today, and have some expendable cash, they could throw away. And in part because their generation is just more socially trusting. They came from a boom time where there was a higher level of social trust. And at that time, elderly people were just average-aged people. Today, we talk about a bunco ring run out of Denver, Colorado in the early 1900s that was headed by a man named Lou Blonger. Lou Blonger had such a stranglehold in the city that he was just known as the boss and had everyone on his payroll from the police to the mayor. At least until a young upstart, David, decided to take on Goliath. Come with us as we discuss how one moral district attorney plotted his way to the downfall of the $1 Million Bunco Ring on the Season 18 premiere of White Collars, Red Hands.
Man, Season 18.
Yep. Long awaited.
Long awaited.
All right.
Yes. Hope you all had happy holidays.
I don't.
Wow.
I don't.
Wow.
Thank you for listening, but I hope you didn't have a happy holiday.
All right, Kashan.
I hope that it was filled with catharsis and learning, and that you're a better person, but that it wasn't easy. That's what I hope for you.
Okay, just because you had a bad holiday doesn't mean everybody else should
Shut
suffer.
up. No, mine was actually pretty good.
Good.
So mine was. What I want is mine to be better than yours. Actually, that's the kind of person I am.
I guarantee you that it was.
Mine was better.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That makes me feel so good.
Yeah.
Nina. And speaking of, I'm Kashan.
And I'm Nina.
We're back. Season 18 of White Collars, Red Hands. Season 18.
Season 18, baby.
We're back. I don't even think, we talked about it a little bit, but it's been, what month is it?
It's January.
It's January. It was 4 years, 4-year podiversary in October.
It was.
This last year. So crazy that this has been going on for so long, that there's we joke about it all the time, that there's so much of our voices out in the universe.
There is.
If you wanted to go make an AI chatbot of either of us, you technically have more than enough material to do so.
Oh, that's terrifying.
So I'm sure AI could just recreate this podcast if they wanted. So soon we'll be out of jobs. So we might as well get one last episode in on Lou Blonger before
AI takes over.
Yeah, before the computer overlords can just do this for you instead of real humans.
I was born to be unemployed, so
that explains it. That explains the drive.
Yes.
So yeah, let's get into Lou Blonger. Lou Blonger actually was not always Lou Blonger. He was born as Louis Herbert Blonger in 1849 in the small town of Swanton, Vermont, to quite a large family. He was actually...
Well, that name change really hit his identity. So
Yeah, it's just...
Good name.
You drop a vowel. It's probably too expensive. Maybe it was like...
paper letter that you change it?
No, paper vowel per... a la...
Can I buy a vowel?
Yeah, a la... What the hell is that show called? Wheel of Fortune. Yeah, a la Wheel of Fortune. He's like, I can't afford it. Let's stick to more consonants. But yeah, he had a big family. He was the 8th of 13 children.
My.
That his father, Simon Blonger, and mother, Judith Kennedy, brought into the world. I mean, probably normal for this time. I don't know how many of those survived.
That's fair.
It was the mid-1800s, so...
Yeah, infant mortality rate was high, so...
It still is,
to say.
unfortunately, in America. We lead the pack, which is not
That's
a good
not
thing to
good.
be in the podium for. Simon, his dad, was French-Canadian, and Judith, his mother, was originally born in Ireland. She grew up in an orphanage in Ireland.
Oh, that's
Somehow
sad.
made her way to Swanton, Vermont.
Was it the potato famine that brought her here?
Yeah, believe it or not, there's not a lot on two random fucking people from Vermont in the history books.
I'm just saying.
A lot of the stuff about his family came from like writings in Bibles that his like family owned.
Oh, that's weird.
That they were able to go back and look at. Actually, you know
They
what?
couldn't afford a diary, so they just added to scripture.
Well, it's like they would dedicate to people and they would like list their family in them. So that's how they track their lineage.
Oh, interesting.
Which actually I should right now give a big shout out to one of the most well curated blogs on a niche subject I've ever seen. I think it's blongerbros.com or blongerbrothers.com. I'm sorry I'm not remembering it, but you'll find it if you Google search it. Someone from like 10 years ago created this website where they really did a deep dive on all of the research on this and collected it all in one place. Like someone was very passionate about this story. So a lot of information you're finding out today came from them. The last update was in 2016. So thank you so much.
Wow.
For doing this, because without you, there was not a lot on this. Surprisingly, there have been like not a lot of people have covered this story. So, which is weird because it's crazy. So yeah, you're getting it straight from the secondary source horse's mouth right now. The whole family, the whole Blonger family, or Blonger family at this point, packed up and moved from Vermont to Schulzburg, Wisconsin, when Lou was 5 years old. Most likely so Simon could work at the local lead mine. It was a lead mining town, which is a terrible type of mine
That's
to
a good
be
way
at.
to die.
Although it said that he was a stonemason by trade, so I don't know if he was at the mine or just doing something with stone in a lead mining town, but either way, that's where they went. Lou's mother died when he was 10, 5 years later, but not much is really known about what happened to his father. Lead poisoning, maybe? I don't know. Or maybe he abandoned the family because when Lou moved in with his older sister after Judith's death, he and his brothers all dropped that E from their name and started, and like the Blongers became just the Blongers. So I don't know if that was just like they tried to sound cool or if it was some actual decision they made, because it wasn't just him, it was like him and all of his brothers.
Oh yeah, that would indicate that probably something happened, because why would you just change your name for no reason?
Yeah, so I don't know. But when the Civil War started, Lou's brothers joined the fight for the Union. And although he was barely 15, Lou joined them as well in 1864. But don't worry, it was the Civil War, but they didn't just have young boys on the front lines of the bloodiest war in America. Oh, wait. Oh, no, I'm sorry. There's actually more to that sentence here. Let me try again. Don't worry. They didn't have a young boy on the front lines of the bloodiest war in America without him absolutely shredding on a flute, all right? Lou Blonger was a fifer in the war. They were young boys who would play a fife, which is like a tiny flute, a lot like a piccolo, and they would relay signals for marching orders or formation changes.
When you said that, I was like, I don't think that's true. I'm pretty sure they had a kid that would play the drums in the front.
Yeah, they had drummers and they had fifers, and he was a fifer.
Dang.
He just absolutely shred a fife at the age of 15. Very
That's
accurate.
me shredding the fife.
Accurate representation. According to his service pension file, though, Blonger only served a few weeks of his 100-day enlistment, which they had 100-day enlistments, before suffering some sort of leg injury, which he claimed caused varicose veins and ulcers in the leg for the rest of his life. So
at the age of 10, he got varicose veins?
He was 15. All right.
Sorry, 15.
And it was injury related. I don't know. Once again, these are documents from the 1860s that somehow survived. Well, I think he filed the service pension in 1880, like in the 1880s, but it doesn't matter. They're old. It's hard to find these. And that's all the documentation there was. And he spent the rest of his enlistment past that in a hospital in Chicago.
Sounds cushy.
Compared to being in the Civil War? Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Everything kind of sounds cushy. I'd rather be in that house in Saw 2 than on the front lines of the Civil War, you know? I'll jump into a pit of hypodermic needles before running into a pack of Confederates pointing them big old muskets at me.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know?
That's fair.
After the war ended the next year in 1865, Blonger reconnected with his brother Sam, who sent Lou to study at a business college in Chicago. After which, the two left for the Great Open West in 1870 and picked up side quests along the way. They would stop in towns, and Lou would usually run a saloon in the town, while his brother Sam, he was a miner with an E-R, and would do some prospecting. Yeah, he's a miner with an E-R, unlike the Fifers in the Civil War, which were miners with an O-R. And he would do some prospecting for gold, and because it's out there in them dar hills, all right? And they first found themselves in Colorado in 1879 when Lou was already 30 years old.
Old fuck.
I know, right?
God.
It's
life's over. I mean,
30
really?
years old. How old? How grossly old, right?
In 1860s? Time's a ticking.
Oh my God. Since he had provided entertainment of sorts at his saloons, Lou tried to open a vaudeville theater in Georgetown, Colorado. And his brother Sam actually ran for mayor in the nearby town of Leadville. Both of those turned out the same way, though, poorly for the Blongers. So they packed up once again and they moved to New Albuquerque, which would later just become Albuquerque. And after the war that destroys humans is over, will likely just be called Old Albuquerque, if our alien overlords are still partial to English city names. Here, the Blongers finally got a taste of real power in society, which they had obviously been seeking. Sam Blonger, still trying to get into a political office, actually got himself appointed as the marshal of the town in 1882.
Oh, wow.
And he made his little brother his first deputy.
Sounds like nepotism.
It was. They went on some great brotherly crime-fighting adventures, having shootouts with ruffians and throwing them in the pen. But you know, they were not perfect specimens themselves, because on the side, they made their money in the business of vice, running horse racing books and managing a town brothel.
You know what? I was going to say, when you were talking about the saloons, I was wondering if he had anything to do with sex work in the saloons. When I was in 5th grade, we watched this like little documentary for kids about the gold rush, but they were like talking about the saloons and how the gold miners would go to the saloons at night. And then they were like, there were saloon girls that would keep the men company. And at the time I didn't understand what was happening. And then in like 15 years later, after I watched this documentary, like I was, reminiscing, I guess. And I was like, oh my God, they were sex workers. And they added that in the documentary for 11-year-olds.
Yes, that was around, and it was around specifically in his saloons. They were referred to as painted ladies.
Why were they painted?
They got makeup on.
Oh, okay, that's fair.
Painted ladies, which just reminds me of Cabaret.
Yeah.
So they did not. It wasn't all them, just running brothels and being shitty lawmen. They did not just sentence in history during their martial days, as they happened to be the muscle in town when famous American lawman Wyatt Earp made his ride through New Mexico chasing the cowboys he believed had murdered his brother Morgan and attempted murder of his brother Virgil in response to the killing of 3 cowboys, which was that was the crew's name, were the Cowboys. So before they were
that was original.
Before they were America's team, they shot some lawmen, and that was at the shootout at OK Corral, the most famous shootout of the Old West.
Don't know much about that.
I read a little bit about it. I don't know. I've listened to a podcast on it actually too, like a deep dive into the shootout at OK Corral. It lasted like 30 seconds, but like people talk about it all the time. People who are interested in the Old West.
Was it super bloody?
Like I think like 5 people died. So just as many people as the Boston Massacre. So take it for what you will. Lou and Sam Blonger were likely part of the posse that protected the Earp crew when they passed through New Albuquerque.
Interesting.
So, whatever. That's something that would be on a plaque in New Albuquerque, probably. That's
Well,
all they got
what else
going
do
for
they
them.
have?
That's all they got going for them. That being said, the marshal appointment only lasted 5 months, and after that ended, and over the next 6 years, the Blongers kept on the move and stuck mostly to running gambling halls and prospecting kind of around the Southwest, before finally settling back down in the main backdrop for today's story, Denver, Colorado.
Beautiful town.
Have not been.
Me neither, but I hear it's beautiful.
You can't just say, what are you, a politician? Beautiful place. Beautiful place.
Beautiful place.
I love it.
Here they have mountains there.
I've never been there, but I love it.
I love it. I love the beautiful people of Denver.
Go Broncos.
Yeah.
Denver was a big town, boasting a population of just under 107,000 people in 1890. And that was just 14 years after Colorado gained statehood in 1876. And Lou Blonger got to doing what he did best. He started running gambling houses, and he, with Sam, opened up the Blonger Bros gambling house on Larimer Street, and eventually a saloon, the Elite Saloon, on Stout Street in 1889. That latter one, I guess, was famous for a very long time. I don't think it's still standing, but I guess it had like a really ornate, like frescoed ceiling, and was kind of like a landmark for quite some time. In the gambling house, primarily they were running poker, which was developed here in America, is very popular in the Wild West, and they also were running some other card games, like a French game called Pharaoh, which I don't really know anything about, as well as some dice games, but they also started branching into some more illegal realms, believe it or not, since they're on the podcast, right?
Yep.
They were running an illegal lottery dubbed as the Policy Racket, or numbers game, that paid out on a daily basis. And they, at first, besides running gambling, which was illegal, they also started separating suckers from their money at first just by fixing the games they already had. Something that casinos can still be found doing to this day. I mean, there's always a house edge, but they can find ways to cheat you as well. But they also moved into the realm of bunco games, or big cons, which would become a favorite of Lou Blonger. And at first, when they were operating these gambling halls and saloons, Lou was actually working under a kingpin that ran kind of the gambling scene in Denver at the time by the name of Big Ed Chase, who ran a place called the Palace Theater, which was a vaudeville theater that also had a gambling hall inside of it. Kind of like Las Vegas, actually. They got
that
like
sounds
a theater
like Vegas
combined with a gambling area. Ed Chase, 3 decades prior, had actually been on the Denver City Council and saw to it that Denver stopped fining gambling halls. And
they were fining them?
yeah, okay, so I mean, this is the 1800s, so
Yeah.
like gambling is still widely seen as kind of like immoral.
Yeah.
So, and I talk about this later, but it's like a lot of the times it is illegal, but just like not enforced. So, and it is the Wild West, so it's just not as like governed at the time.
Like you had your local law, but like government wasn't really a thing at that time out there, so.
Yeah, so like it is illegal, but like if the town council says like not chill, then it's kind of chill.
They'll look away.
Yeah, it's just much more fluid. And he saw to it. He was on the council and he saw to it that they stopped finding gambling halls, and then he started getting a vice grip on the gambling in the city, of course.
He was like, "Oh, well, once I start making money off of it, it's fine."
Well, yeah, he was biased. He had a vested interest in them reducing fines on gambling halls.
Right.
Not to mention, he also had a hefty list of people on his payroll to keep prying eyes off of his business anyway, including many police officers and even the mayor of Denver, who received a huge 20% cut of their haul to just like not care about it.
It's good to see that some things never change.
Oh, yeah, no.
Some things just always stay the same.
And the corruption in Denver surrounding this was crazy and stays crazy. So
I believe that.
Lou did not originally do much work with Ed on the gambling side. He was like involved in their gambling hall, but primarily what Lou did was actually work in order to keep the government out of his business even more. He worked to help ensure that elections went his way. And Lou was a vote fixer, where on election days, they would kind of scrape up anyone they could find, drunks at the bars, people sleeping on the street, general men of disrepute, and transported them to a polling station, and then using bribery or intimidation or both, they convinced these men to vote for the candidates that were willing to look the other way on Blonger and Chase's dealings and sway elections. Fun fact, this is a likely way that Edgar Allan Poe died. He was found just like in different clothes in a ditch.
Oh, interesting.
And then died, and they think that he was like forced to vote and like beat up. In Baltimore.
That I did not know that, actually.
Fun random fact that I had hiding out. When the Blongers opened their gambling hall, originally they paid Chase a part of their take, and everything was kind of in balance. But soon, a fit of law and order seized the city of Denver. The chief of police was replaced with a man named Hamilton Armstrong.
Oh, sounds like a rule follower.
Yeah, he was not interested in the bribes offered to him to look the other way. He was interested in enforcing the law. There was like, I think this is probably myth, but there was a story that someone was running like an illegal gambling hall in their house, and he broke in to it while it was running, and without saying a word, just like took an axe and chopped up a roulette table.
Pulled a Jesus at the church where he started flipping the tables.
Yeah, what's that? Like the Market of Damascus?
Yeah.
Or something? Just flipping over. Yeah, he came in and he axed up a roulette table, supposedly. And like I was mentioning earlier, as far as I can tell, gambling wasn't really legal per se until much later in Colorado's history, or like the town could make it legal, but like it wasn't legal in Colorado, and I think it was more assumed it was illegal until someone said it wasn't, kind of thing.
Ask for forgiveness, not permission.
A lot of Bible references.
That's not a Bible reference.
Whatever. I haven't read the book. I don't know what's in it. It was often looked away from because what was the Wild West, and there was looked away from because in what was the Wild West, there was a deficit in adequate law enforcement. I mean, Blonger, like Sam and Lou Blonger were literally lawmen, like not.
They were the law enforcement.
Like 6 years ago at this point, just because someone said like, we need someone. You
guys are good with a gun, right?
They're like, you'll do it.
You guys can do it. Great.
You enforce laws now.
Wouldn't it be cool if you and your brother actually played policemen for real? And they're like, fuck yeah.
Like, hell yeah.
And then that's how you became the cops.
And it's funny because they actually, I didn't even mention it, they had two more of their brothers join them too. They were like a whole brother posse of sheriffs. And in most places where the gambling was good, the law enforcement could just get paid off, like because the people running it would have enough money to give them good bribes. Yeah. And at this time, there was a big gold and silver mining boom that brought a lot of people to the area, some of which did get wealthy pretty quick and were prime marks for these rigged gambling establishments. And this new police chief just really believed in enforcing these laws, like I mentioned. And the Blonger Bros gambling house was one of those that he actually shut down in 1892, just a few years after it opened. Although they were allowed to keep the elite saloon since it was, just a saloon. Even though they also ran gambling games out of it, I guess they just did it more in secret. And Armstrong also decided to target Big Ed Chase. And when Chase tried to bribe him with a $13,000 bribe, a not insignificant amount of money in the late 19th century.
You could probably bribe me with $13,000 in the 21st century.
Like at this time, it's got to be, that's like multiple years salary for sure.
For sure.
If not more. It's a lot of money. But Armstrong was like, nah, I'm not taking that bribe, and instead threw him in jail. So with now this like big kingpin behind bars, there was an open spot.
Who's going to be the new kingpin?
To lead all the gambling in the city. And And Lou Blonger's right here. So he slotted in and he just started taking over everything. A few years later, in 1895, gambling was made legal in Denver, pushed by the city council as a means to bring money into the town. They basically said, like, this brings money into Denver, so, like, allow gambling to happen. And the gambling done at Lou Blonger's elite became above board once again. Well, except for the marked cards and the loaded dice they were using. And their bunco games. So let's finally get into what a bunco is.
I have no idea what this is.
You did get the reference about the dice game, right? Like bunco is a dice game.
I think I've heard of it, but I don't really know what it is.
Yeah, you just you take turns like rolling 3 dice and like you want to get 3 of the same kind like on the round you're on. I don't know. It's something I played as a kid.
Sounds like Yahtzee.
It's a lot like Yahtzee, actually.
Yeah, I played Yahtzee.
So it's basically that, but with 3 dice instead of 6. But a bunco in this instance is when a mark is targeted and they are persuaded to purchase something that's basically completely worthless. And one of Blonger's favorite fake things to sell were stocks. He would have people eavesdropping throughout the city, and these people were known as ropers. These ropers would look for wealthy tourists and even look through hotel registries for anyone visiting Denver that they could con. They didn't want to con local people because, one, it kept the police off their back because the police were more okay. Like the corrupt cops were more okay with them getting out of towners than they were people from the town. Just causes less headache. And also, like, they just weren't around to find you later.
Right.
They would have to leave at some point, so you could like steal their money and they would leave. So after these ropers would find these wealthy out-of-towners, they would then strike up a conversation with them and lead them to the area of an office that they had set up by kind of whatever means necessary. And someone inside the office would then send out someone called a spieler, and the spieler would do exactly what their name suggests, talk a lot. Spielers were like the true con men. They were like quick talking and they were skilled in the arts of persuasion. They would usually, in this instance, pretend to be like a famous stock analyst or just like someone who has done really well, has made themselves really wealthy in the stock market. And they would convince this mark that they knew of a stock that was going to go up soon and kind of be like, oh, well, you know, I know we just met, but I'll be nice to you. Like, this stock's gonna pop off. Like, if you can invest, I would invest now. And actually, there's a place that sells stock right here in this office.
Oh, right here. It's right next door to us.
Yeah, the building like I almost came out of. So the mark would enter the office where a fake secretary would sell them the fake stock that they had talked about. And then by the time the mark realized that they'd been had, the entire office would have been moved. And
a pop-up shop, really. And
they'd be out there hundreds or thousands of dollars. And if they went to the police were so crooked that they would do like a fake investigation, walk around town everywhere except for where the office actually was, because they knew where it was, and be like, oh, well, I guess they're gone. And just like not, and then eventually they'd have to go back to wherever they're from.
Yeah, they just would be shit out of luck.
And they're just out all their money.
Oh, man.
And from each scam, Blonger and his representative at the scam, often his right-hand man, a man known as Kid Duffy, who was kind of like the muscle behind Blonger's brains, would each get 10%. The spieler would get 15%, and then the roper and the secretary would each get 5%, and then the rest would go to cover expenses, including the $50 per week that Blonger paid to many police officers on the force to look the other way. No matter what the haul was, they got their $50 a week. This is just one example of many bunco games that were being run all across Denver. And Lou Blonger ended up being involved with almost all of them. He rose to the top of an organization of con men that ran these bunco scams, and their ranks were supposedly 600 strong. They had 600 con men running these kind of scams all throughout the city, and they all paid a cut.
Just in Denver?
This is just in Denver.
That's crazy.
And they all paid a cut.
Of a town of only 107,000? You have 600 running a scam? That's nuts.
Supposedly they had like sister organizations in some other cities.
Okay.
But this was just 600 in Denver alone.
Crazy.
Lou Blonger also found other more legitimate sources of income. In 1892, he and his brother finally had their prospecting pay off when they found a gold mine, later to be known as the Forest Queen, that provided them with a steady income and also provided a good cover for Blonger for all of his illicit gains. You could just say, well, I'm rich because of my gold mine, even if the gold mine was like, you know, it was providing them good money, but nowhere near the money that he was actually making. And he just had this outward personality of like a well-to-do mining magnate, which he lived up to perfectly. And he put on a really good, like, public face. I mean, he would donate to charities. He owned like a cherry orchard, would donate like boxes of cherries to charities. He would hand out like $20 bills on the street to people around Christmas time.
Well, and $20 back then, that's a lot of money.
No, it's good. And he would hand deliver turkeys to poor families.
Like Scrooge.
Like Scrooge at the end of the movie.
At the end of the movie.
At like good Scrooge.
Spoiler. Sorry.
Yeah, if you haven't gotten
haven't seen A Christmas Carol.
To Christmas Carol in like the 100 years it's been around, sorry. But yes, he does buy the turkey at the end for that guy who works with him and his little crippled
Tiny
boy.
Tim.
Yes. So
Crippled Craig.
So that is not his name. And it shouldn't be.
No, it's Tiny Tim.
But really, most of his money was not coming from the gold mine. It was coming from this bunco ring, later dubbed the Million Dollar Bunco Ring. But the name is actually a bit of an understatement, as the schemes were raking in an estimated $1 to $3 million per year, which is $20 to $60 million per year in today's money. Woo! In total. And despite these appearances, he was a vicious criminal who had beaten and robbed many in his earlier years under Ed Chase. Like, Kid Duffy was doing all like the beatings now, but he wasn't a good guy.
Yeah, Lou Blonger was not good.
He has a long history of being an organized criminal. And Blonger, he had wrapped a chokehold on the city to the point that no one dare challenge his authority because everyone was on his payroll, and elected officials at both the city and state level were there partially because he had stuffed the ballots with their names. They all owed fealty to the true boss of Denver. And this went on for a good long time. Decades, to be exact. And when the Roaring 20s swept through Denver, Lou Blonger was still king. That is, until Philip Van Cise came along.
Dun, dun, dun.
Philip Van Cise was a lawyer, World War I veteran, and an all-around incorruptible gentleman, supposedly. A lot of the information about this comes from his book, so of course he was an incorruptible gentleman. After practicing law for 11 years, he decided that he wanted to run for district attorney in Denver in 1920. His candidates in the primary were backed by one by the Blonger gang and the other by a state senator, which actually divided the vote so much that Cise came out as an underdog.
Oh, wow.
As an underdog winner in that primary. And after his victory, Cise was approached by the inspector of police saying that he could introduce him to a man that held at least 1,500 votes that could go Cise's way in the race. And at first, Cise didn't care, as he would get these offers kind of all the time, like, oh, talk to this person, he has influence, blah, 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 blah. And he wasn't really much for political schmoozing, but eventually he decided to meet this person, and he was only mildly surprised that the man who could get him the votes that was in his office for the meeting was none other than Lou Blonger himself, now in his 70s.
Getting up there.
Blonger had stated he would be happy to give the Cise campaign $25,000 because Blonger was a veteran himself, sort of. He played the fucking fife.
I'm sorry, that's kind of crazy that he lived through the Civil War and World War I.
Well, they were only 50 years
I know
apart.
that they weren't that far apart, but in my, like, you don't really think of them being that close together.
No, but they were.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Okay.
But yeah, veteran, once again, a little bit of a stretch.
You don't know what he saw on those battlefields, Kashawn.
It was 3 weeks.
With his fife. He only had his fife for protection.
It was 3 weeks. I guess, to be fair, Philip Van Cise he was in like the National Guard. He was.
Are you saying the National Guard's not a real branch of the U.S. military?
I'm saying that it is often seen they don't see as much active combat as the other branches of the military. And I think that's a pretty fair thing to say. But that being said, he actually did work as an intelligence officer in France. Like he wasn't just like here in America.
Yeah.
He was actually over there like doing stuff. But Blonger said because he was a veteran himself, he made the case that he wanted to support the only veteran on the ballot. Cise, however, knew who Blonger was, obviously, and didn't want to take his money. So he basically just said, like, yeah, I mean, like, maybe, but, like, I want to pay for it myself first, and then if I need it, it's nice to know that I can reach out, like, basically, like fuck off, bro. Then, after some more small talk, Blonger went in for the hard sell and said that, sometimes, right, his business associates that sell stocks, right, they get misrepresented by some tourist who runs down to the police station, and the police just like, they're like, ugh, I've got too much on my plate, just put out an arrest warrant. So they'd get arrested and get put up on bond, and he'd have to go down to the courthouse and pay all this bond to get him out. And they never got convicted anyway, right? So, hey, Mr. Van Cise, if that happens, can you just tell me that you'll just always give them a bond of a flat $1,000 and just call it done? And Van Cise was like, well, I know that when these people are scamming people out of money, it's like multiple thousands of dollars, like into the tens of thousands of dollars, maybe. So if you just had to come down and pay $1,000 to get your boy out, if he actually got caught, that doesn't really cut too much into your bottom line.
Yeah.
So he told him no. He said, I think it'd actually be nicer if just all bond is set at twice whatever they're accused of stealing, because then they couldn't just like use the money they got to get out.
Yeah.
And Blonger did not like that.
I'm sure he did not.
He did not like that answer. And he quickly made an excuse to leave the meeting. And then started doing everything he could to sway the election to the other side against Van Cise.
I bet he did.
At first, it looked as if the same old poll-fixing tactics were working on election night, but Cise was actually bolstered from a heavy turnout from the Denver suburbs and went on to win the election and become district attorney. Afterwards, he quickly set about tearing down the $1 Million Bunco Ring. He couldn't really do it like above board, though, because he couldn't mount a case using like the police to investigate or with funding doled out by the mayor, because both the mayor and the police, except for Armstrong, who was still the chief of police at this time, were on Blonger's payroll. Mm-hmm. So he had to be a little bit more like creative.
Yeah, crafty
about it. And actually, not too long after his election, Armstrong also died of a heart attack.
Oh.
So like the one person in the police department that probably would have
sided with him
was gone. So firstly, Cise gathered information himself and made an index of all the con men operating under Blonger. He had an index of 600 people.
Oh my God, that's
in
a
the city that were connected to Blonger. And he even hired undercover detectives to infiltrate the ring and to pose as like swindlers and con men themselves to send back data on how the ring was running. And Cise was even known to root through Blonger's trash regularly, looking for evidence.
Did he have a warrant for that? Probably not.
I mean, so he had talked to the governor, and the governor did back the investigation.
Okay.
He said go.
Oh, okay.
He said go do it, but he just couldn't do anything with like the municipal government. So yes and no. But I don't know what he found in the trash. Maybe something. The most information he got though was actually because he found a way to plant an old timey bug in Blonger's office, this thing called a dictaphone.
A dictaphone.
A dictaphone in his office so that he could listen in on his conversations.
A dictaphone. Isn't that kind of like when you get an unsolicited dick pic? Dictaphone. It's the dick to the phone. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There was a joke in there somewhere. You didn't find it, but there is one. There is one in there somewhere.
I'm rusty.
Sure.
It's been 3 weeks.
I'm sure. Everything falls apart in 3 weeks.
It's true.
This, of course, would not get approval from the mayor, right? Because the mayor also doesn't want to get caught with corruption charges. So instead, Seiss went around to raise the money necessary for all this chicanery from the wealthy philanthropists of Denver who wanted to see their town cleaned up from all of this bullshit that was going on. And in the end, 31 of them decided to fund the cause.
Wow.
So this was like crowdfunded police work.
He did the OG GoFundMe.
Yeah, which is crazy. Meanwhile, Seiss disguised the money incoming from the mayor and Blonger by pretending that it was money that he raised from pious people to fund raids on brothels in the town. But instead, it was to take them down. He also pulled a bunch of tactics to keep, like, head games to keep Blonger thinking that he wasn't a threat. Like, he would purposely arrest con men that were in the ring and then, like, accusing them of conning people and then pretend that they fooled him into thinking that they were upright citizens and then release them. Like, just to, like...
He's like, oh, you know what? You are a nice guy. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and then he would listen on the fucking... on the recording...
dictaphone.
On the dictaphone. Being, like, to Blonger being like, this guy's an idiot. He doesn't know what he's doing. Like, he literally arrested someone and just let him go. And he's just sitting there going, like, this is hilarious. And also at the same time... caught Blonger being like, these are con men that he arrested. Then, after gathering enough evidence, Van Seiss publicly announced that he was going on an extended vacation into the mountains. But in actuality, he never went anywhere. And Blonger and his gang thought that the only man in their way was out of town for a month and they could just do whatever they wanted. They let their guard down, and that is when Van Seiss pounced. They had arranged for a previous victim of one of these scams, a man named Frank Norfleet, to parade around a hotel in town. And since he was seen as an easy mark because he had already fell for another scam, he was quickly reapproached by someone on the Blonger gang. And when he was taken to the stock office, the gang was arrested by 16 state troopers that were given to Van Seiss by the governor, including Kid Duffy himself was arrested. Quickly, they also arrested Lou Blonger, as well as many others. And by the end of it, 33 men sat in a makeshift prison in the basement of a local church because they couldn't take them to the police station because the crooked cops would tip off others in town so they could skip and run away. So they just took it to a basement.
To the church basement.
To a church basement. In the trial that followed, Blonger was represented by a famous lawyer who argued cases in front of the Supreme Court and even had a few, let's just say, sympathetic judges on his payroll. So Lou was confident. They sought to interrupt the process by filing as many motions as they could to delay the trial, but eventually the day came for opening statements. And then, day after day, the prosecution filled the witness stand with victims who told the story of how they were conned out of their life savings in some instances. I mean, there were multiple instances of people losing so much money that they committed suicide.
Oh, wow.
There was a lot of bad fallout from this. And in the end, they had 100 victims shipped in to tell their stories.
Wow.
And their ace in the hole was a man named Len Remy, who worked as a bookmaker for the Bunco games and could identify directly how Blonger led up the ring of cons and testified to that all of them were involved, what they did. These testimonies went on for weeks. I think 7 weeks of testimony. It was crazy. And the defense mostly just used this time to name call and assassinate the character of these people that were providing evidence, but there was a lot of them. And when the prosecution rested, the defense didn't call one witness. They just closed.
What?
And I was like, okay. So it looked like a guilty verdict, was inevitable,
happen,
right?
Yeah.
And as it turns out, the defense thought that the trial was kind of a mere formality because they had approached and bribed 4 of the jurors to not convict him at $500 apiece, which is a lot for just normal people. And one of the jurors, though, he heard the pitch, he took the money, but then he immediately informed the judge of the attempt and gave them the $500.
Oh, wow.
So good on that guy.
Yeah.
And then after deliberating for a long time, the jury still had 3 holdouts who didn't want to submit a guilty verdict. Wonder who those were or why they held out, huh? And that is when that one juror who didn't take the bribe publicly called them out on their shit in front of all the jurors and said like something along the lines of like, you know what the difference is between you and me is that I gave my $500 to the judge and you still got yours.
Oh.
And they were like, oh, exactly. Oh, he said what? And then after a little bit longer and a total of 102 hours of deliberation. Because at first, the other people, after the bribe came out, the other jurors refused to call it as a deadlock. They're like, no, we're staying here until you decide to change to guilty. And it took forever, 102 hours. And the jury handed out a big old guilty verdict to the now 73-year-old Lou Blonger. At sentencing, the main men, including Blonger, got handed 7 to 10 years, while the others got 3 to 10. Blonger, however, would not need all of those 7 to 10 years. It's just 5 months into his sentence at the Colorado State Penitentiary. He succumbed to old age. And I think that the story and ramifications of what Lou Blonger did is best summed up in a quote, supposedly to Blonger from Van Cise after Blonger was pleading to him for leniency in sentencing because he would certainly die in prison. Van Cise showed that Blonger's actions ruined people and even led some to suicide when he said, "What leniency have you shown to others? What God have you worshipped except the almighty dollar?
It says in God you trust on it.
When you stole preacher Minaj's trust funds, did you hesitate? When overwhelmed with shame, he committed suicide. Did you give any aid to his family? When you took the life earnings of old man Donovan of New Orleans and reduced him from comfort to penury, what did you do to ease the last months of his life? You have been a criminal from the time of your youth. You have been the fixer of the town. You have prostituted justice. You have bribed judges and jurors, state, city, and police officials. You have ruined hundreds of men. With that record, tell me why a death sentence is not your due." And with that, I leave you on the case of Lou Blonger and the downfall of the Million Dollar Bunco Ring in Denver, Colorado in the early 1900s. Been spending a lot of time around the early 1900s recently.
You have.
It was freaking the whiskey ring.
Yes.
The murder of Harry K. Thaw, or Harry K. Thaw's murder of Sanford White.
Yes. I think we're out of that time period though now. For the rest of the season.
As far as I know, yes.
Yeah,
so it's been a lot of very historical stuff recently. But I hope you guys have liked it. If you did like it, right? You know, there's ways you can show it. Normal spiel, man. You can go to Spotify. You can leave a rating. You can leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts. Whatever you can do to please show us some love. You can buy merch. If you go to our website, whitecollarsredhands.com, you can buy a sweatshirt. They have hats now. You can buy a hat.
Ooh, really?
Yeah. A bag, a mouse pad, a bunch of shit. I don't know. Go there, buy something if you want. It's money. You know what merch is. I'm not gonna keep telling you.
Yeah, we don't.
You can also interact with us on our socials. For while it's still around, you can go to TikTok at White Collars Redheads. It's
like what? 6 more days?
a little peek behind the curtain here. We're recording this on the 14th.
Yeah, 5 more days.
It goes up on Friday. So by the time you're hearing this, it's quite possible that TikTok is only with us for 2 more days.
Yeah.
So we're on there at White Collars Red Hands. You want to go watch a video before that's gone forever. But if you want to watch them elsewhere or interact with us elsewhere, we're on Instagram at whitecollars_red hands, Twitter or X at whitecollarspod. We are also, am I forgetting one? Nah, Facebook, that one. Facebook.com /whitecollarsredhands. You can also just go to our website. Like I said, you can message us through there. There is a little contact us page that goes straight to our email, whitecollarsredhands@gmail.com. You can contact us there, submit an episode request for this season or our upcoming season. Yeah, feel free to submit an episode for this season. We try to do a fan submitted episode every season, and we could be doing yours as our next one. You can also just help us for free by telling a friend. You know, people who listen to podcasts, people always listen to podcasts, and they're always looking for more. So why don't you throw our hat in the ring, White Collars, Red Hands? Let them know. You know what? I think that's it.
I think that's it.
It's been 3 weeks. I'm forgetting how to do everything. I was like, oh my God, how do I get? I guess I'll just stumble through this outro.
It's not like it's not like riding a bike.
It's not.
You do kind of forget.
Yeah. I'm bad at riding bikes too, so that doesn't help.
He did get a concussion once.
I was on a scooter though. It's on a scooter, not on a bike. Okay. I'm yet to get a concussion on a bike one of these days. Anyway.
One of these days I'll make him wreck.
Stick in the spokes. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week on another episode of White Collars,
Red Hands.